Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Saturday. I'm very glad that you've joined me to wade into some very controversial waters. We are examining the question of whether or not Loki equals Lodurr. I've been reading the accounts of the Norse creation story and a lot of the commentary thereupon, and thus far I've noticed kind of a 50-50 split of whether it was Odin, V, and Vili who are credited with creating the world and humans, or was it Odin, Honir, and Lodurr who were creating Midgard and the people on it? And then on top of that, there are also competing theories about who Lodurr is. Is he V or Vili? Could he be Freyr? Or is he Loki? Now, as per usual, we don't have enough conclusive information to make an absolute declaration of who's who. I mean, I think we all know that's the way things tend to go when we analyze mythology in general and Norse mythology in particular. We're not surprised by this any more than we are surprised by the fact that the sky is still blue. But the fact remains is that even if we can't conclusively prove anything, the possibility that Lodurr is another name for Loki has been raised amongst galactic circles and amongst spiritual circles, and if that theory is indeed correct, it has massive implications. For starters, it makes it awfully difficult for those who honor the Norse gods to justify the idea that Loki is just a troublemaking giant. He's not really a god. Now, if Loki is Lodurr, then that means he's one of the big three who created the earth and mankind. And if that doesn't indicate godly divinity, then I'm really not sure what does. It also raises the possibility that one of the reasons why Loki's relationship with the rest of the Aesir seemed to be on kind of a rocky path to begin with was owing to a lack of respect to him and the role that he played. Perhaps they were not giving him sufficient honor for what he did to help things come into being. That would certainly create problems. This also affects perceptions about Loki's powers and his areas of concern. This would mean that he's not just a god of mischief or a god of chaos, which those are not small things, but this would also indicate that he is a god of transformation, and one who gave something of himself to make us, and therefore we would be his Get just as surely as we are Odin and Honir's. So denying Loki would be to deny a core aspect of ourselves. Now, for anyone watching us who may not be familiar with the myth, I want to give you the gist of the creation of Midgard and humanity. It occurs after Odin, Honir, and Lodurr, or Odin, V, and Vili, depending on what source you read. They kill Ymir, who was the first giant, and they used his body to create all the realms, including Midgard. Then they took an ash tree and an elm tree, and they made the first humans, named Ask and Embla. The gods then gave Ask and Embla gifts. Odin provided the breath of life, Honir gave them their intellectual capacities, and then Lodurr gave them their physical beauty and attributes. These three gifts make a complete human being. And if it was Lodurr or possibly Loki who gave us our corporeal forms, that's no small thing. Now, as myth is metaphor, this speaks to our practical capacities. And that would really make sense that Lodurr could be Loki, because this is the gift that Loki himself would have to give us, because he is a being of very practical action, a hands-on approach in taking the initiative in life. So it's perfectly consistent with his personality and conduct, and it does kind of add a little bit of weight to this theory. And just reflect on how Norse society placed great importance upon your deeds. What you did was who you were. People dealt with you on that basis. Your very reputation was the culmination and result of your actions. So our capacity to take action and exist in this corporeal form and do all these things is credited to Lodurr. So the questions of whether or not he's in fact Loki, it actually matters to us a great deal. Now, we know that it's not at all unusual for the Norse gods to be known by more than one name. There's examples of this all over the myths. Odin is perhaps the most notorious, but other gods certainly went about through different names. Loki has many different names. The goddess Freya has many different names. It happens. And in addition to that, Odin, Honir, and Loki are often mentioned in several myths as being a trio, traveling around, having this bond amongst themselves, and that does add weight to the idea that perhaps Lodurr is another name for Loki, because if Loki wasn't a natural part of this trio, then shouldn't Lodurr have been there in his place, with Loki, wandering off somewhere else? Now, without delving too deeply into a very detailed mind-numbing scholastic linguistic debate, Believe me, I don't want to cause anyone's eyes to glaze over. I suffered through it, and if you're really interested, I mean, by all means, do your own research. But it is it is soul sucking getting into all of that. But the ultimate gist of these debates is that there are some kennings that are associated with Odin, Honir, and Loki, and these kennings speak to the relationship that they have amongst themselves. And because of the nature of these, and Lodurr being spoken of as Honir's friend, or Odin being spoken of as Loki's friend, and just the way it was describing, it was always in relationship to the bond between this three trio, which we know Loki was certainly a trio along with Odin and Honir. It just adds some circumstantial evidence that Loki and Lodurr are one and the same. Now, when I examine these kinds of controversies, I ask myself which theory requires the most mental gymnastics and which requires the least mental gymnastics. And I also try to be honest with myself about my own biases. After all, it would be very easy for anyone who's critical of my views to just dismiss me, say, oh, Brigantia, she's just a Loki devotee. She's always trying to make him seem more important than he really is. She finds excuses for him. She foolishly tries to improve his reputation, and isn't this awful? But I, in turn, could also say that his detractors, they are going out of their way to try and diminish Loki, and sometimes have an absolute blind hatred of him, and it really clouds their judgment, and it closes their mind to any other possibilities, any other kind of interpretations. And these are all factors at play, and whenever we're kind of sifting through what is, what could be, theories of all this kind, I think it's good to take all of that into consideration. So then I ask myself, what's more likely? That Lodurr is just this independent creator god who got minimal mention in other myths after being part of this momentous event of creation, and he just happened to also be best buds with Odin and Honir, who, more often than not, Odin and Honir are associated with Loki? Or is it more plausible that Lodurr is just another name for Loki, just like Lopt is, and his transformative capacity played a role in creation myth, which also speaks to Loki's transformative capacity? Now, I'm not telling anyone what to think or believe. This is something that's interesting to consider. It has potentially huge ramifications depending on what conclusions you draw, which are, it's up to you to decide. It's up to you to look at this information for yourself, do your own research, and just think, I don't, I think this X, Y, and Z. That's for you to do. But just going through these explorations of these kinds of ideas, whether you end up agreeing or disagreeing with them, that has value in and of itself. It sharpens our thinking process. And best of all, as we go through this process, occasionally we find a spiritual nugget, and that's always worthwhile. So I hope this was at least an interesting theory for you to entertain. It's something that I'll definitely be doing a lot more meditation about. And we'll just see what comes of that. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments section below, or come visit me on Discord at Blackbird's Brew. There is a link to join in the description box below, and I would be very happy to see you there and visit with you. But that's all for now, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!